Week 1 is almost in the books, and you might be asking yourself, are there defensive players that I need to be picking up? Well, we've got your questions answered on the IDP Waiver Wire video. Welcome back. We missed you guys. We did this all last year, and we do appreciate everybody that watched last year. We're going to fire it up again this year, and hopefully we can help you find some IDP gold in their hills. So with that being said, we are going to start with linebackers. There are a bevy of them to talk about. I watched the Houston Colts game and saw Kamu, Grugier, Hill all over the place. I mean, the dude was phenomenal. And I don't know exactly at the end how many tackles he racked up, but if he doesn't have the most in the league, I wouldn't be surprised if he was right at the top. Mr. Kraig, what do you think about the linebackers? We got Mykal Walker from Falcons. We got TJ Edwards from the Eagles. We got Leighton Vander, Esch from your Cowboys, and then Kamu, Grugier, Hill. Who do you like? Who do you think's the best to add? Where are you at with these guys?
So it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I would put Leighton Vander Esch at the bottom just for the purpose of kind of seeing what he is even in the system. The only reason he really makes this is, you know, he had that 85% snap share as a starting middle linebacker for the Cowboys, and you throw into there that Micah, he did play 100% of the snaps, but only 35% of those really came as a linebacker, 63% were as an edge, and then he had a few other, you know, over cornerback or whatever. Anthony Barr played 56, and he had Dante Fowler 16. That was really it for the linebacker. So if Vander Esch is going to have that snap share, you know, he got you 6 solos and 3 assists. He's probably not going to do anything amazing for you. But if you're looking for a bench guy that you can plug in to get you some tackles, that's probably going to be him. The other 3 are more interesting because those are guys that are basically going to be out there. It looks like around 100% of the time for each of their teams. Talked about Kamu. He is leading the league with 18 tackles so far. He had 14 solos, 4 assists. The Texans were interesting. I think they had 6 different players at 100% snap share. Another one was Christian Kirksey. So those 2 are probably going to be the guys out there for a while, especially with rookie Christian Harris on the IR. But Cam was certainly a guy you can put out there. Just don't be expecting this. You know, the Colts ran the ball 38 times, 31 of them, I think, were with Jonathan Taylor. You kind of knew what you were getting with the Colts, and it won't be that high, but he should be able to put up tackles for you. And then for Walker, you know, Deion Jones was out for the first 4 weeks. 100% snap share. Again, he had the green dot calling the play first team. 4 solos, 2 assists, a sack, and a forced fumble. And that's only with the Saints running the ball 19 times. You get the Buccaneers in this next week, who ran the ball 33 times against Dallas. And I think Tampa's going to have to continue to throw the ball more. Tampa's going to have to continue to run the ball more with that banged up offensive line. You can't let Tom Brady get killed this early in the season. So more opportunity there. And quite simply, TJ Edwards is the guy right now for the Eagles. Last year, over the last 8 weeks, he had a 95% snap share, picked up right back off with 100% snap share this week, 5 solos, 2 assists, and a pass deflection. It's nothing amazing, but he's clearly the guy as linebacker right there. The team talked him up. The players talked him up this offseason. So certainly he should be rostered more than he is.
Well, and I think the Barnett season-ending injury, if I remember correctly, I thought I just read that here this afternoon, that he's done for the year. I think that helps add some more value to Edwards. I mean, I know that defensive line is pretty strong, but I think that then will in turn maybe give him more opportunities for tackles, because that's one less really strong defensive player to maybe take up some of those tackles or anything of that situation. I wouldn't be surprised if it helped him out. I think he's still standalone value on his own for the rest of the season anyway. I'm completely with you. I think these are all really strong ads. I mean, and we are talking about guys that have small ownership percentages in, you know, Yahoo, ESPN, Sleeper. So we try to find you guys that may not be heavily rostered. So if these guys are rostered and you have questions about maybe some guys in your league that aren't rostered, post them in the comments below. We will absolutely get back to you. We try to keep on these comments on the daily, so you will get some answers back from us. To move on next, I want to talk DBs. We also include a cornerback, not just because he's a Lions cornerback, but a cornerback in this group this week. But we do want to talk about him as well. And Craig's got to do a victory lap. Talanoa Hufanga is a guy that he's been talking up for a minute, and he's probably the one, I should say you're probably the one person in the fantasy community I know talked him up the most of anyone that I've interacted with. And he showed out game, you know, in week 1. I mean, looked good against Chicago, and I expect that to continue. Talk about some of these guys. Feel free to. I know, and I will say from a personal perspective, I watched most of Detroit's game and have started rewatching it. Okudah looked the part of a guy that you can trust. I mean, they tried to challenge him, and he shut down Devonta Smith when he was covering him. I don't think Devonta Smith had a catch on Okudah in the game.
He didn't end the game, I don't think, even. But
yeah. So talk about these guys, take your victory lap on Hufanga and talk about Owens and some of these other guys and what you like about them.
Yeah, and to your point before, all of these guys are 10% or less rostership. I don't think anyone even hit 9% of anyone that we're talking about today. So a lot of these guys are going to be available in your leagues. But yeah, Talanoa, Hufanga, you can find my article as a sleeper for 2022 over on rotoheat.com. Starting strong safety for the 49ers, 9 solos, 2 assists, a pass deflection, and interception. For a guy that is a second-year player out of USC, I think he was a 3rd or 4th round pick. He's a guy that's really physical. He had some health issues because of that, and we'll see how that goes. But right now, for a guy that's barely owned on any of these platforms, he just stood out, and I would say go get him right away. I mean, he's a priority for safety for me with the way that they play football and that defense ahead of him. Another guy that seemingly came out of nowhere. A lot of people were looking at Eric Murray as one of the safeties for the Houston Texans, and Jonathan Owens, 100% snap share. 11 solos, 4 assists, and a pass deflection. He was flying around. He was a sure tackler. Again, he isn't necessarily always going to be having those same opportunities. They're not playing the Colts every week, but he showed that he belonged out there for this past week, and it doesn't look like he's going to relent that starting position. Another guy that is a little bit different. Owens played a little bit for the Texans. He sort of been in the practice squad on and off, and at the end of the year, he played with them. But, Marcus Epps is a guy that people have had feelings on in the community for a while, and he looked great this week in that Eagles secondary. Again, 100% of the defensive snaps, 8 solos, 2 assists, and he was just a playmaker for him. If you're sort of looking for just the next week, they're playing the Vikings, and the Vikings showed out really well, and that could end up being a shootout if you looked at how both of those games went this past week. So, and Hufanga certainly, I think, have rest of the season value, and Owens, if he keeps playing the way that he is, certainly he could. They invested more in Murray than they did him. Not that it's a lot on either side, but for a young defense, you'll love what you saw out of Owens. And then, yes, Jeff Okudah. I found it interesting, but, just digging into the stuff initially, he was 2nd in snaps, but he was taken out due to cramps, according to him, or scheduled rest, according to Dan Campbell. So whatever the reason is, I think it was the end of the first half, he came back in and he was fine. And he had a great stat line for a cornerback. And they play the Commanders in this next week, who just threw the ball 42 times against the Jaguars. And I think they're going to have to continue to throw the ball. That Lions defensive line showed up very nicely, and Commanders still are not someone I believe in right now as, a future playoff team or something. So I think the Lions up front there could give them some issues. Throwing the ball, Okudah was a top 3 pick in this draft. There's 3 or 5. I don't remember.
Yeah, he was number 3 overall.
So he's got the talent. Yeah. Seems like he's healthy. So the guy that is available, it's like less than 4% across the board. If you need a cornerback, go grab him.
Yeah, and I one of the leagues I joined this offseason, I picked him up prior to week 1, thinking, well, maybe he looked like their best corner, and I expect as long as he's healthy, they'll continue to put him in for a significant snap share. So it's definitely one, if you need corner, that's definitely a way to go. And I will say with the Owens situation, Owens and Murray in Houston, Petry's going to start. He looked solid as a rookie first game in. I mean, obviously got a little aggressive there a couple times and got penalized for it. But for Owens and Murray, there's not enough money that if Owens is just a better player, he's going to be in. So I'm 100% with you on that. I mean, money only outweighs that if you've sunk a ton of cash into a guy. And Murray didn't get a ton. So I'm with you on that one. All right, so rounding out, we're talking defensive linemen. We got Dominique Robinson, rookie 5th rounder for the Bears, who Rick was very excited about performing. He was hoping that he wouldn't break out so quickly so that he could try to stash him on some squads, and that didn't happen, but looked good. Then you got, my guy, Kwity Paye from the Colts, looked good against the Texans. Texans offensive line's not great, though, so, there is that as well. And then you got Clowney, who's been up and down in his career, and B.J. Hill, defensive tackle from the Bengals. All very intriguing prospects, and if you need D-tackle, I think Hill is a guy you can trust the rest of the season. Looked solid from what I watched. I only got to see about half the game so far, but I was impressed with what I saw. What do you make about these defensive linemen?
So for B.J. Hill, I mean, he got a great snap share for a defensive tackle at 81% of the snaps, and he didn't have a huge stat line. You're going to run into that some games, 2 solos and an assist, and saved his day with a sack. But to end 2021, he had 6 regular season games, 4 or 5 combined tackles, and it's the same essentially defense. He's probably playing a little bit more than he did then. situation based here too. Week 2 brings the reeling. That's my team, Dallas Cowboys, who are going to be starting a backup quarterback and have a poor offensive line that got made worse by injuries against the Buccaneers. It's just a good player in a quality situation going into a great matchup, and that's sort of what you're looking for defensive tackles if you're going to stream them. And his rostership again below 10% in pretty much all these platforms. For Paye, it was interesting. Him and Yannick Ngakoue are on the field basically the same amount, like 79, 81%. But Paye, if you listen to the IDP Heat Seeker show, you know we like him a lot more. And he's just the more well-rounded guy. He had 6 goals and assists, which on its own would be great. Throwing a couple sacks there, you have a fantastic day. Sacks aren't always going to be there, but you have that nice floor with the tackles. He's clearly the pickup if you had to pick between Paye and Ngakoue, unless you're in a big play only league. And I think even then you could make the argument to go get Paye because just those added tackles at that point. Robinson's an interesting one. 5th rounder. He barely played in college, really, as far as you look what he did in college. He had 37 tackles, less than 10 sacks, 11 tackles for a loss in his entire career. 5th round pick, super athletic guy. They thought it'd take some time to get him acclimated. He only had that 41% snap share, but he showed up with it, and the team loved the effort. He did great, and that's going to buy you more time, playing time it is, and a rebuilding young team, which is what the Bears are. Al-Qadim Muhammad had the higher snap share. Robert Quinn was out there a lot. Robinson did the best out of them as far as producing. And this is more of a stash and see how it goes the rest of the season. Don't put him out there thinking he's just going to replicate this. But I will say week 2, they're going up against a banged-up Packers offensive line. Super athletic guy. You might get something out of him again, but it is more of just a, stash and see what you get with it. And then Clowney is an interesting guy. Right. Everyone knows the name, and a lot of people have had a cup of tea with him in IDP. It's a situation where, he's going to be playing the Jets, who were just atrocious this coming week. And then they got the Steelers coming up in week 3, which also don't have an amazing offensive line. He had an all right game against Panthers, 3 assists, a half a sack, 2 pass deflections. But he was out there for 83% of the snaps, which I think is only 2% less of 1 snap less than Myles Garrett. So it's basically those 2 out there defensive end. Situation's going to be great. And he has the talent. He's been around somehow 9 years in the league, I think, which seems crazy. But the guy, he still has the talent. We saw it last year. He's still in basically the same situation and going into great matchups. I love him. And this week and probably next week even.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't say must start, but he's probably as close to a must start as there is. That Jets team is they're in a rough spot. That's definitely should be a good winnable matchup for both edge rushers and probably a few other pieces of that defense. So I'm with you 100%. So that's it, folks. Those are your waivers for this week. If you have questions, again, drop them in the comments below. rotoheat.com. You can get to our Discord and jump in the conversation if you want to talk with everybody immediately or post comments here. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. We'll be back here with you each week throughout the season, giving you some waiver. We do appreciate you guys hanging out. Good luck this week. We'll see you later.